Thank you, Madam Chair. The delegation of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea exercises a right of reply to the accusations made by the U.S. and Japanese delegations against the DPRK. First, the United States delegate's allegation has no relevance with the promotion and protection of genuine human rights. It attributes solely to the deep-rooted U.S. hostile policy against the DPRK. Recently, the United States validated North Korea Human Rights Reauthorization Act, which aims at overthrowing the DPRK state system under the pretext of human rights. It goes completely against the spirit of the DPRK-U.S. joint statement, where the two countries committed to shake off bravely their unpleasant past and respect and trust each other and write the mutual relationship fresh in the new form. If the United States really want to talk of human rights, we have more to tell about the human rights violations of the U.S., which is the wasteland of the human rights. In the United States, pervasive, vicious human rights violations take place every day, including killing tens of thousands of people by gun violence every year, racial discrimination, sexual violence, extrajudicial, summary, arbitrary execution of innocent civilians by police and law enforcement personnel. These crimes cannot be imagined in the DPRK, my country, where the people are given importance with the respect and love. The U.S. should become aware that it cannot obtain anything from the anti-DPRK human rights racket, and it should begin its work to wash out its shameful disgrace as global kingpin of human rights violations and destroyer of the enjoyment of human rights on the planet. Second, Japan has no right to talk about human rights of others because it is a state of aggression and crimes. Japan invaded the Korean Peninsula and imposed a brutal colonial rule for 40 years, committing the oversized crimes against humanity, such as forcible abduction of 8.4 million Koreans, massacre of 1 billion Koreans, and imposition of sexual slavery to 200,000 Korean women and girls for the then the Japanese Imperial Army. If a personal state perpetrated a crime, a primary justice and law for the person or state is to reflect on the crime and apologize and compensate. But Japan, far from apology and compensation, does not hesitate to cover up the past crimes and distort its aggression history. The current Japanese authorities' behavior is extremely absurd, just like the guilty filing the suit against the victim, as well as the unpardonable disrespect to the Korean people and the peoples of Asia and many countries, and mockery to the international community. The abduction issue, which Japanese delegate just mentioned, was already solved by the sincere effort of the DPRK. Japan should bear in mind that no status of the limitations is applicable to such crimes against humanity, and choose the way of making a full apology and compensation on the oversized past crime before it will be too late. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I thank the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. I have also been informed that the representative of China would like to make a statement in exercise of the right to reply in accordance with Rule 115 of the Rules of Procedure of the General Assembly. The first intervention should be limited to 5 minutes and the second to 3 minutes. I give the floor to China.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The U.S. statement contained baseless accusations on the human rights situation in China. The accusations were entirely for political purposes and detached from facts. China expresses resolute objection and rejection. I would like to discuss the human rights situation in the United States. The United States prohibited nationals from 6 Muslim countries from entering the United States because of Islamophobia. The Guantanamo prison is notorious. According to UN Special Rapporteur on Torture, torture of prisoners continues in Guantanamo, criticizing the United States for violating Convention Against Torture, failing to hold perpetrators accountable, resulting in impunity. The problem of racial discrimination is prominent in the United States. Rights of ethnic minorities, especially ethnic Asians, are seriously and systematically violated. Exclusion and discrimination against immigrants are on the rise. Recently, large-scale detention and repatriation of illegal immigrants are growing rapidly. The situation of protection of the rights of children is worrisome in the United States. Large-scale cases of sexual abuses of children often occur. Child marriage in the name of freedom of religious belief exists extensively. China hopes that the United States will face squarely and reflect on its own human rights problems and effectively improve its own human rights situation. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I thank China. I have been informed that the representative of the Russian Federation would like to make a statement in exercise of the right of reply in accordance with Rule 115 of the Rules of Procedure of the General Assembly. I'd once again like to remind that the first intervention should be limited to 5 minutes and the second to 3 minutes. I give the floor to the Russian Federation.
Thank you, Chair. In link to the statement made by the USA, we would like to recall again that Crimea and the city of Sevastopol is a territory of the Russian Federation, based on a free and sovereign vote of the people. I'd also like to note that in the conflict in the southeast of Ukraine, the Russian side in no way is participating in this. And the statement about Russian aggression is yet again an attempt to justify Kiev's terror against its own population. On the Syrian issue, there is a hypocrisy on the side of our American colleagues, and I'd like to recall that at the same time as the Russian Federation, on the request of the legitimate government of Syria, is undertaking active efforts as part of its counter-terrorism activities. And the US-led international coalition, according to sources from Syria, has been using phosphorus ammunition in the area of Hajin. On the 23rd of October, they carried out airstrikes on the town of Essus, on a mosque there in the east of Deir ez-Zor. As a result of this, around 70 people died. We hope for a suitable response from the international community to these flagrant incidents, and also for an independent and transparent international investigation. I thank you for your attention.
I thank the Russian Federation. I have been informed that the representative of Japan would like to make a statement in exercise of the right of reply in accordance with Rule 115 of the Rules of Procedure of the General Assembly. I'd once again like to remind that the first intervention should be limited to 5 minutes and the second to 3 minutes. I give the floor to Japan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My delegation would like to exercise its right of reply in response to the statement made by the representative of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. The allegations and figures that the DPRK's delegation mentioned on the issues of the past are based on factual error and are groundless. I would like to emphasize here that for over 70 years since the end of World War II, Japan has consistently respected democracy and human rights and contributed to the peace and prosperity of the Asia-Pacific region and the international community. Japan and the DPRK should bring true peace to Northeast Asia by overcoming mutual mistrust and deepening cooperation with each other. Japan would like to share this approach and call upon DPRK side to seek for a bright future together. Should DPRK continues to bring up the same issues, Japan will not repeat our position by using the right of reply. However, this does not mean Japan agreed with the DPRK's position. My delegation also would like to exercise its right of reply in response to the statement said in the right of reply exercised by the DPRK. It's about regarding the abduction issue. The representative of the DPRK stated to the effect that the abduction issue has already been settled. This, however, contradicts the current agreement between Japan and the DPRK and is therefore incorrect. Japan in no way can accept it. In the Stockholm Agreement of May 2014, notwithstanding its previous position, the DPRK promised to carry out comprehensive and thorough investigations concerning all Japanese nationals, including the abductees. We urge the DPRK to implement the Stockholm Agreement and return all abductees to Japan as quickly as possible. Thank you.
I thank Japan, and I recognize the representative of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, and I'd like to remind that his second statement is limited to 3 minutes. I give the floor to the DPRK.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Japanese authorities continues to violate the human rights of the Koreans, in particular living in Japan. In June this year, Japanese authorities confiscated the souvenirs and sportswear printed with the letter of Joseon, means DPRK, and its national flag from the students of the Kobe Joseon High School of Chongyun, who were returning back after the visit to their motherland. The souvenirs are given from their families and relatives living in the DPRK. The incident is the human rights violation we can never pardon. In other words, it is the crime against humanity that flagrantly violated the human rights of our compatriots and humanism and international law. It is once again reminded that the abduction issue was already solved by the sincere efforts of the DPRK. And it is also reminded that no status limitations is applicable to the Japanese crimes against humanity in the past. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I thank the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, and I now give the floor to Japan, and I'd like to remind once again that the second right of reply is limited to 3 minutes. You have the floor, Japan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My delegation would like to exercise the right of reply to the statement by the DPRK. The laws and regulations of Japan prohibit import of goods if DPRK is there in their place of origin or place of shipment. However, in the case of import of hand luggage by those who temporarily left Japan for DPRK, import is in principle allowed if the goods in the hand luggage are being used or were undoubtedly used during the trip. The aforementioned rule applies equally to all people who import goods to Japan, and therefore any allegation of discrimination does not reflect the reality. I would like to also repeat that the abduction issue has not been resolved yet, so we do not agree with the statement with the DPRK. Thank you.
I thank Japan. Distinguished delegates, the committee will continue and conclude its general discussion of agenda item 74 as a whole on Monday, 29th of October at 10 a.m. sharp. Before adjourning, I wish to remind the committee that the deadline for the submission of draft proposals under this agenda item is Wednesday, the 31st of October at 1 p.m. I wish you all a good weekend. The meeting is adjourned.